Last time on Toon Starters.
Alright, I'll be the first to admit that the last time I looked at Tower of God, I may have jumped the gun a little bit. It was my first crack at reviewing an ongoing anime series, and a relatively popular one at that. And I may or may not have recorded that Tower of God video knowing it was an unpopular opinion, mostly for clout. And while my thoughts on the series were genuine at the time, in retrospect, deliberately shitting on a series with a minimum understanding of the series is not a habit I want to be making. That said, the season has officially drawn to a close, so I think now is as good a time as any to give Tower of God a second chance. Okay, so 13 episodes later, and I can say with confidence that Tower of God does in fact get better. In one area. Though, to be fair, it improved a hell of a lot in this one area. And that area being the characters. So in my last video, I was talking shit about how all the characters have interchangeable personalities, unsubstantiated motivations, and were basically all assholes. And let me tell you, I am very, very glad to have been thoroughly proven wrong. So let's take this one step at a time. No personalities? Wrong. Tower of God actually went a respectable distance in making its motley of characters feel more, well, human. It's in the little things, you know? Like when they're eating in the cafeteria and joking around after trying to murder each other. Or when they get together to respect the passing of what's-his-face. It just makes everybody feel a little more real, you know? Next up, no motivations? Also wrong. A good chunk of these goobers were proven to have legit reasons for being involved in the story, that I can't remember in detail. But they do have reasons, which counts for something. And I gotta give a shout out to those princesses of jihad for banking on that character development. For real, if these chicks had their own sitcom series, I'd watch the shit out of it. And last but not least, are they all assholes? Wrong! Well, half wrong. I know I harped on these guys for being selfish tools, but it's been established that it's nothing personal for the most part, and they do seem to respect that all's fair in love and war. So yeah, not as big of a problem as I thought. In short, Bam and Dorsey, Rack, and everybody else, you guys are all pretty dope. Dead ass, I was really impressed by how much more likable everybody got. And sadly, I really wish I could say the same about the writing, but alas, I cannot. There's a lot of individual story elements that I could pull apart, but I realized that they all fall under the umbrella of Tower of God's biggest narrative problem. That being, it's really, really plotty. Like, I get that this is a high fantasy series with an expansive world to build and a shitload of lore to unpack. But bro, you can't just drop everything on your audience when it feels convenient and expect everyone to just run with it. Maybe I'm just a dumbass, but half the time, I was seriously having trouble following the rules of this world. Like, did anyone else feel like the tag game was needlessly convoluted? And that doesn't even hold a ticket to the absolute insanity of the administrator test, as enjoyable as that arc was. They're throwing stuff like goblins, a minotaur thing, and net dolphins, and I'm just like, dude, slow down. Your audience isn't gonna care about all these fantastical elements until you've established the emotional impact it'll have on the characters first. To that end, we have things like calendar weapons, and shrinking gators, and hammer space briefcases, and I'm just like, bro, if you're gonna have a magic system, or equivalent thereof, you need to define the limitations of what this world can or can't do. If you just pull stuff out of your ass, then your show isn't gonna have any stakes. Word of advice, Tower of God. Keep it simple at first. You can build up the heavier stuff as you go along. Cool? Cool. And the last thing I want to bring up is the animation again. And I'm gonna be straight with you guys, but my opinion hasn't really changed here. The characters still move in those uniform weightless motions, which might work for a slice of life series, but a fantasy anime up to its knees in action scenes doesn't really lend itself to that kind of animation style. The character designs, however, have actually kind of grown on me, though the whole everybody has the same eyes thing still bugs me. I know, I'm sorry guys, but it's just a personal hang-up of mine. Come at me. Anyway, A tier art, B plus-ish tier animation. So that's where I currently stand on Tower of God. I said at the start that the show does get better, and I really do mean that. Even in the areas that I said were pretty stagnant, did drop some hints of improvement here and there. And I agree that the series is setting itself up to become vastly superior in due time, as everyone keeps saying. Now, knowing all that, you might be wondering what that means about my overall impression of the show. And frankly, there's no easy answer to that. Look, Tower of God was conceived as a long runner, and I respect that. But shows like that really fuck up my reviewing sensibilities. I've always felt that the experience of watching anime as a journey from start to finish was just as paramount as the episodes themselves. We all joke about the oh-so-popular 3-episode rule, but there's a reason that's a thing. It's not supposed to be an indicator about the quality of the series right then and there, but rather, it's a metric we use to measure whether or not you're willing to trudge through all the bullshit to reach a satisfying end. But with Tower of God, instead of a 3-episode rule, it's more like a 1-season rule. I've seen a bunch of y'all saying things like, "This is just a prologue, man, it gets much, much better later on. First season just introduces the premise for what's to come. Stick with it, dude, the payoff will be so worth it." And I don't doubt you guys. I'll totally buy that Tower of God is phenomenal further down the road. But in doing so, it's also an admittance that the series is in fact mediocre in the beginning. Which, to be fair, isn't uncommon, but it sucks balls for reviewers because now we're faced with the following quandary. Is it fair to judge an anime by its weakest point? Like I said, a slow start is often expected with long-running series. It's gotten to the point where we rate shows like Naruto, or even Pokemon, not as a cohesive whole, but by the merits of its individual arcs. Now ideally, a truly exceptional series will preempt it by being entertaining even when we don't get to the quote-unquote meat of the story. Or at worst, an anime will be subpar throughout its entire run. But when there's supposedly a huge discrepancy in quality like with Tower of God, split between seasons at that, it's hard to take a conclusive stance on it. I can't exactly ignore an anime's glaring flaws, even when the majority is kick-ass, but at the same time, I don't think it's fair to have those weaknesses bring down the entire show either. Plenty of artists and writers grow the longer they work on a series, and it just doesn't feel right to have their worst overshadow their best, you know? So keeping that in mind, I think the best approach for giving Tower of God a conclusive rating is to take the series as it is. A 13-episode single core with a beginning, middle, and end. Ultimately, it ended up being a below-average series for me. Now, whether or not the show is solid enough to continue in subsequent seasons is something I'd leave to your discretion. Personally, I don't think I'm invested enough to keep going onto season 2, if we ever get it. But if you think it's worth diving back into, then I say, fuck what I think, man, go for it. If there's one thing I've learned from all this, it's that agreeing to disagree is perfectly fine, as long as you never see them ever again. So I think we can all agree that Rachel is best worst girl. Freaking love that bitch. Anyway, if you guys enjoyed this video, please show your support by leaving a comment, a like, and subscribing to my channel. Until then, stay tuned!